Joining us now is Kate Delaney, the host of the syndicated Kate Delaney Show. Kate, we talked to you last right when these major league organizations, professional sports teams were making the decision to shut down their season for the time being. It was a temporary pause at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak. Here we are a couple of weeks later, and we're starting to see them at least talk about coming back, which for a lot of people is at least something. And when we look at the MLB, for example, it's a little bit of a microcosm of what's going on in the country. It's the public health debate weighed against the economic type of debate that's taking place with these players. Do you think that this is something that they'll be able to get by?
You know, Alex, it's such a tough question because when you think of Major League Baseball, the most I believe they could do would be 82 games. So they would cut the season in half. But then the problem you have is all of the touching that happens in baseball. So they have these proposed rules of social distancing where you have infielders who would have to back up when the runner is going for the bag, which seems ridiculous. And in the dugout, they'd have to have social distancing. And when they travel, they would. And most likely they would play in stadiums where you didn't have any fans. So that means they lose $64,000 at least plus a game when you look at the concessions and that's individual. When you look at the concessions and you go through it, it's astronomical the economic plague that this has caused rather. But I think it's going to be pretty tough. They're weighing it. It's this big question mark. Should we do it? But if somebody gets sick or something happens, that would spell disaster. Now, I'll jump ahead and tell you football tomorrow, they are moving forward with opening their practice facilities. So tomorrow, there will be a lot of quarterbacks, wide receivers, defensive linemen that will go in, get some workouts in. There'll be some rules, but they're planning to go ahead with business as usual.
And I want to talk about something that was a little bit more immediate, and that's the idea of the NBA. In fact, I think the NBA Finals would be taking place about a month from now, if I'm not mistaken. And a lot of teams saying that they hope that they can still maybe continue the season that was, of course, put on pause early on. But a lot of people saying that maybe rushing it a little bit too soon, maybe for the very same reasons that you're talking about. I mean, NBA is a little bit more physical. There's more contact than the MLB, believe it or not. But I think that still poses the problems that a lot of people are talking about. Do you think that the realistic possibility of the NBA returning anytime soon is not so realistic?
I think it's not so realistic depending on what we see with COVID-19 and depending on the cities that we're talking about, because there was conversation about having neutral games in neutral sites. So, for example, in Orlando at Walt Disney World in their complex. But then, of course, Florida has a lot of cases there, too. So that's part of the problem. Now, same thing, they want to let players into the facilities, but they're saying they could practice four at a time, which would be pretty tough if you think about
Yeah.
game planning.
No, and it does make sense. I mean, that is something, it's a 5-on-5 game. It's almost like saying play without the ball for the time being. It's something that doesn't necessarily translate the same way. But I think that the idea of sporting facilities is an interesting one, too, because even with the NFL, they say that even if these players can go and run drills by themselves, get medically type of cleared in order to do these things, it's still an issue of whether or not the coaches can come in because it might be different region to region. New York, for example, might be a little bit delayed when it comes to returning back and having coaches start game planning the way that we're talking about, whereas a state like Texas might not have those same obstacles. So I think that's something, too, where a lot of this is still in flux. But before I let you go, too, I want to talk about the Olympics. That is something that last time we talked about, they were still planning on going forward with that. Now we see that it is going to be delayed. They're doing everything they can to make sure that that is the situation come next summer. Do you think that the Olympics will take place next summer?
I do. I think there's a great chance if you look at the timeline, vaccines, what's going to happen with this virus. And of course, you and I don't have the magic 8 ball where we
Right.
would shake it up and say, ask again later. But my feeling is that there's a really good chance that that's going to happen. And they're pumping money in that direction to make sure they can go off as planned in Tokyo. So fingers crossed, I
Yeah.
think that's the best bet.
And of course, that was something last time we talked. We thought that there was no chance it was going to take place this summer, acknowledging the idea that it's people from all over the world coming in this concentrated area. But when we talk about something a year away, that does seem a little bit more plausible because usually when we talk about the vaccine, a year is the long term. They're hoping by the end of 2020. So there is some optimism for sports fans when it comes to that front. Kate Delaney, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you.